Welcome to the first biochemistry video for this year. We're looking at properties of water, and water is very important to all living things. And so we're looking at why water acts the way it does, and really how does that structure contribute to those properties of water that make it unique. And the short answer to that is its polarity. Oxygen is made up of two hydrogens and one oxygen, and the oxygen is more electronegative than the more electronegative than the hydrogen, and so it's going to want, oxygen wants the electrons more than the hydrogen does. There's more protons in here than hydrogen has. Oxygen has 8 protons, and so hydrogen only has 1 proton, and so the electrons are going to be drawn towards these 8 protons more than the hydrogens. Because of this, the electrons are shared unevenly, and when hydrogen bonds with oxygen, because the electrons are shared unevenly, the sharing makes us have a covalent bond. But it's a special type of covalent bond. Since this end is more positive, this end is more negative, we call this a polar molecule. And so we call this a polar covalent bond. And this isn't necessarily unique to water. However, water in and of itself being polar and having these polar covalent bonds helps it act the way it does. Because of its polarity and these polar covalent bonds, we have something called hydrogen bonding between water molecules. Hydrogen bonds are not really bonds because we're not sharing or giving and taking electrons from different atoms. This is more like magnets. And so in magnets, the positive end of the magnet is drawn towards the negative end. So we have an attraction here. And that's all we have is an attraction. These hydrogen bonds are attractions from the negative end of the one water molecule to the positive end of the other water molecule. And so they clump together. And this hydrogen bonding allows for these special properties. Right? And again, we've already taken a look at some of these special properties. But realistically, if you think about it, water should be a gas when we are at room temperature, if it follows the rules of the other different types of substances. It should not take as much to heat water as it does. Most things do not have their solid form being less dense than their liquid form. So hydrogen bonding does all of these things. And so one of the first things that we want to talk about is cohesion. Because hydrogen and oxygen are attracted to one another in different water molecules, these water molecules want to stick to one another. So we're sticking to the same substance when we talk about cohesion. And cohesion allows for things like surface tension, like floating the paperclip on the surface of the water. Now the paperclip was more dense than the water, but because of the surface tension, because of those attractive forces between water molecules, we could hold the paperclip, if we set it on there gently enough, on the top of the water. Adhesion is water molecules sticking to other substances. So we see every day water sticking to glass. And we see that when it rains, and we've got water droplets running down the side of one of our windows. And it does that because we have adhesion between the water and the glass. if you get your hand wet underneath a faucet and you hold your hand out over the sink, you will see water droplets sticking to the bottom of your fingers, and that's because of adhesion. The water is sticking to your skin. So cohesion is one substance sticking to itself, and adhesion is one substance sticking to something else. One of the ways that we see this, and we could do this in class, we could have a water bucket and different sized tubings, and some of that water will be drawn up through the tubing. And this is due to what we call capillary action. And this is how plants get their water from the roots up to their leaves and through their stems. We also see capillary action in the human body within the blood system, within our blood vessels. Alright, so we could have it in roots, up through a plant, into its stems, and into its leaves, or we could have the blood vessels show us capillary action. We actually have something in our body called capillaries. Now, the adhesion allows the water to stick to the insides of the tubes. But if it was, we would just get like little drops sticking to the inside of the tubes if we didn't have cohesion. And so the cohesion allows this drop of water right here to stick to this water droplet right here, and so on and so forth, until we get one long column of water coming up through the tube. So capillary action is actually an example of both adhesion and cohesion. Water also has a really high heat capacity, and heat capacity talks about the energy required to increase the temperature of the substance. And in water, that's relatively high. And basically what this means are large bodies of water are going to hold in the heat for long periods of time. And this allows the water environments not to have such a drastic change in temperature so that organisms living within them can survive. In animals, heat capacity helps regulate the temperature of our cell. Our cell will go through different processes that create heat, and the water will absorb that heat, and then the water will be let out of the cell to kind of get rid of some of that heat, and that's why we sweat. Our cells are getting rid of some of that water that has the heat trapped in it. Water is also called the universal solvent, and so solutions are mixtures. We have two types of mixtures. We have solutions and we have suspensions. Solutions are where we are dissolving something. So solutions are dissolving. That's a special type of mixture. Suspensions are where we just mix things up. And if we mix things up, generally, if we take enough time, we can separate those things out without doing much to them. Solutions, we can take whatever has been dissolved out of solution, but we usually have to do something to it. So, for instance, if we wanted salt out of water, we'd have to evaporate the water off and leave the salt behind. And if we mixed up some sand and some rocks, we could take the rocks out physically. We could see the difference between the two. Living things are really composed of mixtures, and those mixtures involve water. Most of the things that we need in our body are going to be able to be dissolved by water. And so water usually in our body is not pure, because water is a universal solvent. We call it the universal solvent. Right? So a mixture is a material composed of two or more elements or compounds that are physically mixed together but not chemically combined. And so in solution, we're taking that salt and we're breaking it apart here. We're taking this salt and we're breaking it apart, and the water is basically grabbing on to those salt particles. And we're ionizing the salt. We're getting chlorine ions and sodium ions. in solutions, we have two things. We have a solute, which is being dissolved, and we have a solvent, which is doing the dissolving. Because water is polar, it has an ability to dissolve things that are both polar and nonpolar. We can have ionic compounds and other molecules. So water can easily dissolve salts and sugars and minerals and gases and all those things that we need. It can even dissolve things like alcohol to help get it out of our system. When we reach a given amount that the water can dissolve, we say that it is saturated. Okay? Saturated means that we can't put any more in. It has as much salt as it can handle. If we saturate a sponge, it can't hold any more water. Suspensions, we're going to be able to mix it up, but we can separate those pieces out, and usually they'll settle out. So if you remember the oil and the water, if we mix that oil and water up really well, we can't really see the oil for a few minutes, and then the oil will separate out and come out of suspension and settle on top of the water because of its density. Alright, so most important biological fluids are going to be solutions or suspensions. Blood is mostly water but contains other compounds such as cells and particles and so forth, and it's a suspension. We can take those things out. We can spin the material around a lot, and we can get the red blood cells out, we can get the white blood cells out, we can get the plasma out. If we have a solution, then we have to do something physical to it to get those things out. Next we have acids and bases and pH, and we've talked a little bit about this. Basically water is neutral. Pure water is neutral because it has equal amounts of hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion. When we break water up, we don't get H2 plus O. This does not happen. Actually what we get is hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion. On the pH scale, we are measuring the concentration of hydrogen ions. So this scale runs from 0 to 14. A pH of 7 means that hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions are equal. So water is going to be one of those that has equal parts hydrogen and hydroxide. And so water would be found right here in the middle at 7. The more acidic we are, sorry, there's a little reminder for you. The more acidic we are, the lower our pH is going to be. So this is going to be a really strong acid down here. Strong acids are between 3 and 0. Strong base is going to be between 11 and 14. So these would be strong bases. This means I have, on strong acids, I have a lot of hydrogen ions, and strong bases means I have a lot of hydroxide ions, high number of hydroxide ions. So if we measure certain things, we can come up with a pH. Now the difference between each of these numbers is actually, this would be times 10. So something that has an 8 has 10 times as many hydroxide ions as something that has a pH of 7. So we're talking about a scale of 10 when we're talking about pH. Now in our body we use water as a buffer. Buffers can be added to bases or acids to create things that won't harm our body. Our body must maintain, in most cases, a pH between 6.5 and 7.5 to maintain that homeostasis, maintain that ability to act normal. So we can use water to dilute things so that we can maintain that homeostasis. I hope this helps, and we will be doing some more activities in class on water. See you next time.